Hello there, shortcuts. This is video 2 for the price list that will go out 9 p.m. Sydney time, Wednesday, July 24th. If you like the sound of any of the records on this list and would like to receive the email price list, drop me a note at shortcutsrecords@gmail.com. This is a jazz, soul, funk, and salsa list. So there you go. It has a couple of Shortcuts royalty, but also a lot of things that I've never had before. And hopefully a lot of things that you might enjoy exploring. Now I'm going to kick this off. There's a couple of Marvin Gaye records in this list that I could have chosen either of those, particularly Here My Dear. But I've chosen as a kickoff my favorite recording that I have bought this year. This is a 2024 release. Now, bear in mind that in 2024, I have bought the Rhino High Fidelity pressing of Black Sabbath's debut album, which has a lot of the vinyl world rejoicing, and it is wonderful. And a couple of others. But this is by far my favorite vinyl pressing of 2024. And it is, in fact, this is the copy that I have for sale, but I'm actually going to show you my own copy because it'll have the sleeve off and you'll get to see how beautiful this is. This is the Tone Poet. Look at the reflection. Can you see that? But this is the Tone Poet repress from 1963 of an album called Katanga by Curtis Dupree and Amy Bolton, as well as Jack Wilson, Ray Crawford, on Pacific Jazz Records. Look at that sleeve. I can't believe how. I'm just going to switch this off and see. Come on, go off. I'm going to see if this cuts down the glare a little bit. It's still pretty bad. Anyway, it's a beautiful sleeve, beautiful album. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. I'm also giving this away as part of the package, which is a Blue Note poster of the records from their label formed into the American flag. So you'll see Ray Barretto and Jackie McLean and all sorts of cool things, records you might well have in your collection. I know this is one of my favorites. Midnight Blue by Kenny Burrell, and just above that, Lou Donaldson. So it's a really, really beautiful thing. Now, I'm going to quote a little bit of this. Within the package, you get this little essay by someone called Thomas Conrad, who, for over 30 years, Thomas Conrad has been a journalist focusing primarily on the subject of jazz. His work has appeared in many publications in the United States and Europe, including the New York Times. So what is so interesting about this record? Firstly, I had never heard of it. The sleeve just grabbed me straight off. And Blue Note, it's got to the point with Blue Note where I recognize most of the players, or if I don't recognize, like the Harlan Coben or whatever, if there's a Des Wilkeson, if there's a main name on the undercard, there'll be someone I'll recognize. This is one of the few times over the last few years anyway where I do not recognize a single one of those players, and there's good reason for that. And some of this is a pretty sad story. So the first thing you got to know, this Tone Poet release sounds spectacular. Honestly, it is amazing sounding record. I wondered if it was just me, but it's not. If you look at the Blue Note blogs and the the Hoffman forums and other things, you will find people just raving about this record. So the first thing is 1963 West Coast jazz. It is accessible, melodic, exciting, adrenaline pumping, beautiful guitar, piano, trumpet, bass, drums, and tenor sax. If you pick the things that I love most about Blue Note and munge them all together, you come up with this record. Some things that I don't enjoy sometimes about my Blue Note records is that when the music becomes modal and aggressively atonal, I lose it. It just becomes noise to me, and I just cannot find my way through it. The Blue Note records that I love are those that maintain my attention through drama and melody and how the melody resolves, and also, of course, when the musicianship just leaves me slack-jawed. And this happens all the time on this record. From the second track, which has this beautiful guitar riff, to the third track, which has this piano line that sometimes with some of my all-time favorite jazz records on Blue Note, like, Blue and Sentimental by, there's still one or two tracks where I think, I don't think this hits the quality of, maybe a title track or a lead-off track. Everything on this is great. Katanga, Lonely Woman, Native Land, those three opening, oh my God, they're just so good. The closing track, A Shade of Brown, it's amazing. Remastered by Kevin Gray, and the listening notes here are by, I'm not sure actually who wrote the listening notes, but plated at Coherent Audio. So why do we not know these players? Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about Dupree Bolton as a starting point. So little or nothing is known about Bolton until relatively recently, when some journalists discovered that, and this is in the notes, that he was born 1929, Oklahoma City. His family moved to Los Angeles. He ran away from home at 14 years of age to go and play with Jay McShann. And I believe he spent some time in prison. His life was pretty tough. But he developed his trumpet playing whilst in places like San Quentin, Chino, and the LA County Jail, which is pretty extraordinary. So by the time he got to this record, he had a deal, but I think it's fair to say that he had a self-destructive side to him. And whilst this is an extraordinary documentation of his talent, after this record, he practically disappeared. As it says, he died in 1993. He no longer owned a trumpet, and no one claimed his body, which is just astonishing. When you hear this record, you will be blown away by the fact that this guy didn't become an absolute superstar. And so I'm going to leave it there. I keep talking about this record for the whole time. It's magnificent. It's really hard to get in Australia. I managed to get 2 copies shipped in. I'm just going to give them the price it cost me. I think it cost me like $85 or $90 or something. I'm just going to check. And you'll get that freebie as well. But it's, just a wonderful, wonderful record. And the great thing is, I could have led off with this, and this is equally wonderful as well. Here, My Dear by Marvin Gaye. Look at this gatefold. And on the center, this is the inner, can you see it says judgment across this table? The story of this record is incredible. Look at that sleeve. So Marvin Gaye lived an interesting life. He married Bertie Gordy's, I think it was his sister in the 60s, Anna. They adopted a boy, Marvin, that you will often see credited on Marvin Gaye sleeves. But he lived a life of infidelity, and he met a 16-year-old girl, Justine, I can't remember her name, and fathered some children with her. And it got to the point where Anna, in the mid-70s, said enough's enough, and she filed for divorce. And this is 1975, a real spike in divorces. I was reading the first year where there had been 1 million such events in the history of the United States. And so, Marvin Gaye's mum had stayed with his dad, even though his dad was violent to her because of a sense of duty. But we started to reach a point where women were being even physically, emotionally abused, and they would make a change. And that's a great thing. But negotiating a divorce in 1975 was a challenge. And so after she made a demand of $1 million from him that he couldn't fulfill, they reached a deal, which was that he would pay 300,000 American up front, and that she would get 50% of the royalties of his next album. And his next album was Here My Dear. His only double album is the Japanese first press, and he set out to record the story of their relationship. Now, suffice to say, Anna was not best pleased by what the record is, but what he did was take everything he'd been working toward. A massive Marvin Gaye fan. You've seen the T-shirts and stuff. I've got all of his records, and there's another one of his to come. It is like what's going on isn't an album of pop songs with hooks. It is an album that lends itself to repeated listening because the grooves and the musicianship and the subtlety grabs you over time. And this record is exactly like that. The singing is amazing. The layered harmonies are beyond anything he did on What's Going On. What's Going On was 71. This was 75. So he'd made a couple of albums in between, including Let's Get It On. And it's sometimes bitter, sometimes funny, super mellow in places. It's a really beautiful thing. If you don't know it, dive into Hear My Dear. And I've also added this one in because I think they're an interesting pair. So this is Trouble Man by Marvin Gaye. You can see how it, the sleeve kind of opens up to reveal the man in all his glory. What a beautiful, beautiful man. And this is his only soundtrack. So like Hear My Dear was his only double album, Trouble Man was his only soundtrack, and it is a typical blaxploitation movie. I've watched it. It really isn't worth your time, but the music that he made is stunning. So this is right after What's Going On. I think he did his album of duets with Diana Ross, and this is just before Let's Get It On, and he made a funky orchestral. He hummed the melodies to the orchestra, and the orchestra would then work it out. He just kind of had something in his head that he did find a way to translate. There's only a couple of tracks where he sings. Most of what you get is this really, really groovy, funky soundtrack. I mean, if you think about the classic soundtracks of the 70s, you think Shaft and Superfly. Trouble Man is as good, and that's a Japanese first press as well. Okay, my gosh, 15 minutes in, I've only spoken about 3 records. I'm going to go through some of these pretty quickly. Those of you who know me, this is Shortcuts Royalty territory. The Japanese first press of Swordfish Trombones by Tom Waits. What an album. Shore Leave. 16 shells from a 30-odd 6 in the neighborhood. Frank's Wild Years. This is where Tom Waits changed from being a whiskey-addled troubadour to being a idiosyncratic, odd, and genius chronicler of Americana. And it is an absolute stone-cold classic. All right, here's something I've never had before that the folks in Shinjuku added to the box with some comments saying they love this record, and I've never seen it before. This is Al Green, Tokyo Live, a double album. I'll read some of the tracks in a second. Tired of Being Alone, Let's Stay Together, Belle, Let's Get Married, You Ought to Be With Me, I Feel Good, double LP. This is a really, really nice late 70s representation of Al Green's live show, and it's really lovely. I'm really pleasantly surprised by this and never even knew it existed. So for any Al Green fans, that is a really special, beautiful thing. All right, I have this B.B. King record. Now, I've got a copy of this on my shelf, and this is one of my favourites of his, even though it's from an era that I don't typically reach for. So this is early 80s B.B. King, but it's really melodic guitar playing. The recording itself is really good compared to some of the 70s recordings. Surprisingly strong songwriting, and yeah, one of his best, albeit one that kind of flies under the radar a little bit. He recorded it on his birthday. I think it was like his 56th or 57th birthday, something like that. And it's a joy. It's an absolute joy. Yeah. B.B. King. Yeah, it's just, it's called Blues and Jazz. And it's lovely, lovely, lovely. Now, we all know how much I like a white label promo. Typically means it's been unplayed. And in this case, that's a great thing because this is Tina Turner's greatest album, in my opinion. Feeling Good by Ike and Tina. This is just a party album from start to finish. It might not have a Nutbush City Limits or one of the big hits on it, but from start to finish, it's amazing. The cover versions are fantastic. Her cover versions of She Came In She changes the lyrics subtly, as you're about to hear. She Came In Through the Bathroom Window is pretty great. Can't recommend this highly enough. And, white label promos are a beautiful thing. If you don't know this album, seek it out. Feeling Good, Ike and Tina Turner. All right. Celebrating more legendary soul singers is Attention, Dusty Springfield. Now, the Attention series were Japan only compilation series from the mid-70s where some of the greatest acts of that era were compiled into a short distillation of their very, very best stuff on super high quality vinyl. So the most famous of these is the Attention series on Fontana by Black Sabbath. Now, I have a copy of that out in my crate, so if anyone's interested in that, give me a shout. But this is the Fontana label. Now, this is the distillation of the greatest songs of Dusty Springfield. Now, what you find with a lot of Dusty compilations is they try to cram too much in, and on vinyl, it's not a good thing. So what you've got here is 5 songs on each, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 songs on each side. 6 songs side 1, 5 on side 2. But it includes I Just Want to Be There, Son of a Preacher Man, The Windmills of My Mind, Yesterday When I Was Young, The Look of Love, I Just Don't Know What to Do With Myself. So the cream of the cream of Dusty Springfield on pristine Japanese Fontana vinyl. Okay, I've got one more soul classic. This is the Japanese first press on the Blue and Green Atlantic label of the immortal Otis Redding, the album that was released just after he passed away. I think his greatest single achievement. I've got Dreams to Remember as an opening track. It just still, all these years later, makes my hair stand on end. Nobody's Fault But Mine, Hard to Handle, which of course was covered by the Black Crowes, amongst others. Champagne and Wine and Amen. Just a wonderful record. If you don't have it, it's a really nice copy. And then I'm just going to finish off this list with a couple of Latin salsa records. I've been collecting a few of these up over the last couple of years, getting some duplicates now and having some recommendations sent. So these are Ray Barreto's La Cuna, which is quite a percussion-heavy salsa record. And maybe even better, Celia, Johnny, Justo, and Papo. This is a subsequent record from Celia and Johnny, which I had a few lists back. Recordando el Ayer, which has got piano and some extra voices. Really, really nice recording. Really popular in the West, in the Latin world, on the Ya label. So a couple of really interesting Latin jazz, Brazilian records for you to explore. All right, so there you have it. Marvin Gaye showcased really with Katanga and some other blues and jazz classics on the list as well. If you explore those records and decide you'd like to buy one, then please drop me a line and I'll add you to the price list, which will go out 9 p.m. on Wednesday at Sydney time. That's the 24th. My email address, shortcutsrecordsaus@gmail.com. Thank you as always. Bye.